A proposal like no other. Elena Carter never imagined her life would change overnight. At 25, she had long given up on fairy tales. She had accepted that life was a never-ending grind, a battle where survival was the only prize. Raised in the crumbling outskirts of Brooklyn, she knew what it meant to struggle. While other girls dreamt of love, adventure, and happiness, she dreamt of something far simpler: security. Her mother had passed away when she was 10, and her father had never been in the picture. That left her with her uncle, a man who was more acquainted with the bottom of a whiskey bottle than with the responsibilities of guardianship. By the time she was old enough to understand that no one was coming to save her, she had already learned how to fend for herself. Elena had tried to break free. She worked long shifts at a grocery store after school, saved what little money she could, and even enrolled in college. But life had a cruel sense of humor. Rent skyrocketed, tuition bills piled up, and before she could finish her first semester, she had no choice but to drop out. That's how she found herself here, stuck in an endless cycle of working, sleeping, and barely making ends meet. She was a hostess at the Windsor, one of Manhattan's most exclusive fine dining restaurants. A place where power and wealth gathered, where people who owned the world sipped champagne and never spared a glance at the one serving them. Elena had learned the art of invisibility. She walked through the grand dining hall with perfect posture, wearing the crisp, all-black uniform that management insisted upon. Her hair was pulled into a neat bun, her makeup natural but flawless. She greeted guests with a polite smile, directed them to their tables, and pretended not to notice when they treated her like furniture. It was a job. A means to an end. And then, one night, everything changed. A stranger in the shadows. The evening had been like any other, crowded, loud, and filled with the scent of expensive wine and sizzling steaks. Elena was wiping down the host stand when a shift in the air made her pause. A man had entered the restaurant. He didn't belong to the usual crowd of Wall Street brokers and tech millionaires. He didn't waltz in with the arrogant swagger of someone who expected the world to bow at his feet. Instead, he moved with quiet authority, his presence commanding without needing to announce itself. Elena had seen him before. Not in person, but in magazines, newspapers, and business headlines. Alexander Hawthorne. Billionaire. Real estate mogul. Ruthless negotiator. The kind of man whose name sent a shiver through boardrooms and who built his empire with nothing but sheer determination. He was older, well into his 70s, but there was no weakness in him. His silver hair was neatly combed back, his sharp blue eyes scanning the room with precision. Unlike the other wealthy patrons, he had no entourage, no beautiful young model clinging to his arm, no business associates in tow. He was alone. Elena's breath caught when his gaze landed on her. For the briefest moment, she felt as if she were being assessed, measured. It wasn't a lecherous stare like the ones she often endured from drunk businessmen. It was something else entirely, cold calculation, as if he were considering a proposition that only he could understand. Then, he beckoned her over. A conversation that changed everything. Elena hesitated before walking toward his table. "Mr. Hawthorne," she greeted politely. "Welcome to the Windsor. May I get you a table?" His lips curled into a ghost of a smile. "No, Miss Carter. I didn't come here for dinner." She frowned slightly. "Sir? I came for you." The words sent a chill down her spine. Elena forced herself to remain professional. "I'm sorry, but I don't understand." He reached into the inner pocket of his sleek navy blue suit and pulled out a small black card. Sliding it across the table, he leaned back and studied her reaction. "Meet me at this address tomorrow at noon," he instructed. His voice was calm but carried the weight of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Elena stared at the card. It bore nothing but a penthouse address in the Upper East Side. Her pulse quickened. I I don't understand, she admitted. Why would you want to meet me? A flicker of something unreadable passed through his expression. You'll find out tomorrow. Before she could say another word, he rose from his seat and strode out of the restaurant. Elena stood frozen, the weight of the card in her palm feeling far heavier than it should have. Her co-workers exchanged curious glances, but no one dared to ask. And she had no answers to give. The longest night of her life. That night, Elena lay awake in her tiny apartment, staring at the ceiling. Her mind raced with possibilities. Was it a job offer? A business proposition? A darker kind of arrangement? She knew of men like Alexander Hawthorne. Men with power, money, and the ability to bend the world to their will. He could have anything he wanted, so why was he interested in her? The rational part of her screamed that she should ignore it. But the desperate part of her, the one that had spent years scraping by, couldn't stop thinking about it. What if this was an opportunity? What if saying yes led to something bigger than she could ever dream of? Or, what if it led to something she could never escape from? By the time dawn arrived, she still had no answers. But she knew one thing for sure. She would go. And whatever happened next would change her life forever. The proposal that changed everything. Elena barely slept. By the time morning arrived, she was no closer to understanding why a billionaire like Alexander Hawthorne wanted to meet her. She had considered not going. She had considered throwing the black card into the trash, pretending the encounter had never happened. But as she stared at the water-stained ceiling of her cramped apartment, listening to her neighbor's baby cry through the paper-thin walls, she realized something. She had nothing to lose. Whatever this meeting was about, it wouldn't be worse than the life she was already living. So, with nerves tightening in her stomach, she took the subway across the city, stepping into a world that had always felt unreachable. The penthouse. The address led her to one of Manhattan's most exclusive high-rises. A doorman, dressed in a perfectly pressed navy blue uniform, barely looked at her before pressing a discreet button behind his desk. "You're expected, Miss Carter," he said, his tone clipped but polite. Elena's pulse spiked. She stepped into the elevator, and as the doors slid shut, she watched the city shrink below her. Each floor she ascended felt like another step away from her old life. When the doors opened, she found herself in a penthouse that defied imagination. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the skyline. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow over sleek, modern furniture. The air smelled of expensive leather and something subtly masculine, his scent. And there, seated in a high-backed chair by the window, was Alexander Hawthorne. He was exactly as he had been the night before, poised, unreadable, powerful. Only now, in the daylight, she noticed something she hadn't before. His hands trembled slightly. And though his piercing blue eyes still held their sharpness, there was something lurking beneath them. Something fragile. Something terminal. Elena's breath caught. Was he sick? Before she could speak, he gestured to the chair opposite him. "Sit." She did. For a long moment, he simply studied her, his gaze assessing. Then, he finally spoke. The unthinkable offer. "I don't have time for small talk, Miss Carter," he said. "So I'll get straight to the point." Elena's throat went dry. "I need a wife." Silence. The words hung between them, absurd and impossible. A part of her thought she must have misheard. "Excuse me?" "I need a wife," he repeated, his tone calm. "Immediately." Elena stared at him, waiting for the punchline. It never came. Instead, he leaned forward, resting his hands on the polished mahogany desk between them. "Before you ask, no, this is not about love. It is a business arrangement. One that benefits both of us." Elena's heart pounded. A business arrangement? She swallowed. You want to pay me to marry you? Precisely. Her stomach tightened. Why? He didn't hesitate. I am dying. A chill ran through her. He said it so plainly, as if he were discussing a simple business deal. I have, at best, a year left, he continued, his voice steady. Possibly less. My lawyers and doctors have already confirmed it. Elena's lips parted, but no words came out. He was dying. And he wanted to marry her? She was drowning in questions, but before she could speak, he continued. I have built an empire, Miss Carter. Hawthorne Global has assets across the world, real estate, investments, properties that will outlive me. But there's one issue. She remained silent, heart racing. My estate is complicated. My fortune, my holdings, they are currently set to be divided amongst my board and business partners. His lips curled slightly, the closest thing to a sneer she'd seen from him. Men who have waited years like vultures, circling, eager to tear apart what I built. A slow realization crept over her. He didn't want them to win. I need to change my will, he said simply. To do that, I need a legal heir. Elena's head spun. You want an heir, she echoed. I want a wife who will inherit everything, he corrected. A wife I choose. Not them. Her skin prickled. And then, she asked, barely able to process it. And then, when I die, it's all yours. A heavy silence followed. Elena's heart slammed against her ribs. He was offering her everything. The fortune. The properties. The empire. All of it. If she married him. The catch. 1,000 thoughts crashed through her mind. This is insane, she whispered. You don't even know me. I know enough. He spoke with a certainty that made her shiver. You have no family. No debts to tie you down. You are intelligent, disciplined, and, most importantly, you have nothing to lose. Her fingers clenched into her lap. What's stopping you from picking some other woman? She asked. I don't want someone greedy. His gaze was piercing. I don't want someone who will fight for control over my company or try to rewrite my legacy. His lips curled slightly. I want someone who knows what it means to have nothing. Someone who understands what it's like to fight for survival. And someone who, when this is over, will take the money and walk away. Her chest tightened. Walk away. He didn't want a wife. He wanted a placeholder. Someone who wouldn't challenge his power while he was alive and wouldn't fight for it when he was gone. It was the deal of a lifetime. Marry him. Pretend for a year. Inherit everything. And then? Walk away. The impossible decision. Elena's mind whirled. If she said yes, her days of struggling would be over. She could finally escape the suffocating weight of poverty. No more sleepless nights worrying about rent. No more broken dreams. She could have everything she had ever wanted. But at what cost? She'd be stepping into a life she didn't belong to. Living under the watchful eyes of the world. Tied, legally and publicly, to a man she barely knew. Her pulse thundered. Everything inside her screamed that this was madness. And yet. Her fingers tightened around the black card he had given her the night before. This was her chance. This was her way out. And when fate knocks on your door, you either answer. Or you spend the rest of your life wondering what if. Taking a slow, shaky breath, Elena met his gaze. And whispered. When do we start? The wedding of lies. Elena barely recognized herself in the mirror. For years, she had been accustomed to wearing second-hand clothes, cheap drugstore makeup, and styling her hair in a way that hid its imperfections. But the woman staring back at her now? She looked like she belonged in this world. Her gown, custom-made by an elite Parisian designer, clung to her curves in all the right places, shimmering under the golden glow of the penthouse's chandelier. The diamond necklace around her neck, a Hawthorne family heirloom, felt heavier than it should. Everything about her screamed wealth, elegance, power. And yet, deep inside, she was still the girl from the outskirts of New York, who used to count change at the grocery store and work double shifts just to survive. This wasn't her life. Not really. But for the next year, it had to be. A contract with the devil. The wedding was taking place in less than an hour, inside an exclusive, high-security estate in the Hamptons. Everything had happened so fast. A team of lawyers had drawn up an ironclad prenuptial agreement within 48 hours. Every detail had been carefully planned, how they would appear in public, what she was expected to say in interviews, how she had to behave around the media. The rules were clear. She would inherit everything upon Alexander's death, his wealth, his companies, his estate. In exchange, she had to remain his loyal wife until the very end. No romantic relationships. No scandals. No leaks to the press. Once the year was over, she would walk away. No interference with his business, no challenging his legacy. She had signed the contract without hesitation. But now, standing alone in the penthouse, dressed in a gown worth more than her entire life, reality was setting in. What had she done? The wedding that shook the world. The moment Elena stepped out of the limousine, camera flashes exploded. Journalists, socialites, and billionaires whispered behind their champagne glasses. Who was she? The world was stunned when Alexander Hawthorne announced his sudden engagement to a nobody. Speculation ran wild. Some thought he had lost his mind. Others believed she was a gold digger, a young woman seducing an old, dying billionaire for his money. No one knew the truth. Elena kept her face perfectly neutral as she walked down the aisle, her hand trembling slightly around the bouquet of white roses. Then, her gaze met his. Alexander Hawthorne stood at the altar, as powerful as ever. Despite the illness weakening his body, he was still every bit the legend he had been in his youth, his sharp blue eyes betraying no weakness, no fear. And when he held out his hand, waiting for her to take it, Elena felt an odd chill run down her spine. She placed her hand in his. And just like that, she became Mrs. Elena Hawthorne. Whispers of deception. By the time the wedding reception began, Elena was exhausted. The night had been a blur of fake smiles, champagne toasts, and forced small talk. She had been introduced to CEOs, world leaders, oil tycoons, all men who had built empires like Alexander. But something was off. As the guests mingled around the grand ballroom, Elena noticed the way they looked at her. Suspicious. Curious. Almost resentful. She leaned closer to Alexander, lowering her voice. "They don't approve of me." He smirked, sipping his whiskey. "Of course not." She frowned. "Why?" His fingers tapped against the glass. "Because they expected me to marry someone, controllable. Someone from their world." Her stomach twisted. "And I'm not?" He turned to her, his gaze unreadable. "No, Elena. You're the biggest wild card in the game. The secret that changed everything." Later that night, after the final guest had left, Elena found herself standing on the balcony of their new home, a mansion that overlooked the city skyline. She still hadn't gotten used to the luxury surrounding her. The silk sheets. The gold chandeliers. The fact that she now owned a house larger than any hotel she had ever stepped foot in. It felt like she had been dropped into someone else's life. She turned as Alexander stepped outside, his silhouette strong against the night sky. "I never asked," she said quietly. "Why me?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out an old, worn-out photograph. She frowned, taking it from his hands. The image was faded with time, but she could make out a young woman standing in front of a diner. She looked eerily familiar. Her chest tightened. "Who is this?" Alexander's voice was softer than she had ever heard it. "My first love." Elena felt the breath leave her lungs. The woman in the photo, she had the same dark hair. The same delicate features. The same eyes. She looked just like Elena. Her fingers trembled. "You married me, because I look like her?" Silence. A painful silence. Then, Alexander spoke. "It's more complicated than that." Elena's heart pounded. "What happened to her?" she whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked inside, leaving Elena alone with the one question she feared the most. What had she just walked into? A mansion of secrets. The silence stretched between them like a dark abyss. Elena stood frozen on the balcony, her fingers gripping the photograph of the woman who looked just like her. Alexander had walked away, leaving her alone with her spiraling thoughts. Her pulse pounded in her ears. His first love. Was she just a replacement? A ghost of someone else? She clenched the photo, staring at the woman's delicate features. Who was she? Why did Alexander never mention her? And most importantly, what happened to her? A new home or a golden cage? The next morning, Elena woke up in a bed too big, too luxurious, too unfamiliar. Golden sunlight spilled through the towering windows of the Hawthorne estate, an architectural marvel that sat on a private island off the coast. It was the kind of place fairy tales were set in, but fairy tales were filled with hidden curses. And this house? It was drowning in them. From the moment she stepped out of bed, she felt watched. Maybe it was the high-tech security cameras installed in every hallway. Maybe it was the way the household staff avoided eye contact, speaking in hushed whispers when she passed by. Or maybe it was just her gut screaming that something wasn't right. She had everything she ever wanted: wealth, power, a life of luxury. Then why did she feel trapped? The forbidden wing. That afternoon, Elena wandered through the halls, trying to familiarize herself with her new life. But the deeper she explored the mansion, the stranger it became. There were wings of the house completely locked off. Massive double doors with antique gold locks. Hallways lined with portraits of Hawthorne ancestors whose eyes seemed to follow her. Then, she reached a door at the farthest end of the house, the only one left slightly ajar. Curiosity prickled at her skin. She shouldn't go in. But something pulled her forward. She pushed the door open, stepping into the dimly lit room. At first glance, it looked like an old, abandoned study. Dusty bookshelves. A grand oak desk. The scent of aged paper and something more, faintly floral. And then she saw it. On the desk, beneath a thin layer of dust, sat a collection of photographs and documents. Elena's blood ran cold. It was her. No. It was her face, but not her. Dozens of pictures of the same woman from Alexander's photo, the one who looked just like Elena. Her hands shook as she picked up an old newspaper clipping. The headline sent a chill down her spine. Heiress Amelia Lancaster mysteriously disappears, body never found. Elena's breath hitched. The date? 20 years ago. She needed answers. A dangerous warning. That evening, Elena found Alexander in his private study. She threw the newspaper onto his desk. Who is she? Alexander didn't flinch. He simply leaned back in his chair, his face unreadable. You went into the West Wing, he said, more amused than angry. You didn't answer my question, she shot back. A flicker of something crossed his eyes. Something dangerous. Elena, there are things in this house that should stay buried. Her heart pounded. What happened to her? A long pause. Then, Alexander finally spoke. She was engaged to me, he admitted, his voice distant. She vanished before the wedding. No body. No clues. Just, gone. Elena's stomach churned. And you never found out what happened? His jaw tightened. The world assumed I had something to do with it. Did you? She didn't dare ask. Instead, she whispered, "Why did you marry me?" Alexander studied her for a long moment. Then, he stood, stepping closer. Because, Elena, his voice was dangerously soft. I don't believe in coincidences. She swallowed hard. What does that mean? He reached out, tracing a finger along her jaw. It means I don't think you walking into my life was by accident. Her breath caught. What was he saying? That she was connected to Amelia? That her existence was part of some bigger mystery? She needed time to think. To run. But before she could move, Alexander leaned in, whispering something that made her blood freeze. If you keep digging, Elena, you might not like what you find. Shadows in the night. That night, sleep refused to come. Elena lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. Who was Amelia Lancaster? Why had she disappeared? And why did she feel like someone didn't want her to find out the truth? A sudden sound made her jolt upright. Footsteps. Soft. Careful. Coming from outside her bedroom. Her heart pounded. She slipped out of bed, creeping toward the door. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then, a faint whisper. Elena. She froze. That voice, it wasn't Alexander. Slowly, she turned the doorknob and peeked into the hallway. It was empty. But the feeling of being watched was stronger than ever. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. And for the first time since marrying Alexander Hawthorne, she realized. She might not make it out of this marriage alive. The journal of a ghost. Elena couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. After the whispers outside her room the night before, she barely slept. When morning came, she decided that enough was enough. If she was going to survive in this mansion, she had to uncover the truth. She was done playing the role of the obedient wife. The secret room in the basement. The mansion was massive, so many halls, locked doors, and rooms left to gather dust. But something inside her told her to look below. The basement. A place she hadn't explored yet. Elena made her way down a narrow spiral staircase, the walls growing colder the deeper she went. The moment she reached the bottom, she hesitated. The air smelled different down here. Damp stone. Old wood. Decay. It was too quiet. She moved carefully, the dim overhead light flickering as she walked through the underground corridor. Most of the doors were locked. But then, she found one slightly open. She stepped inside, her breath catching. It was a storage room, but it didn't hold just any old furniture. No. It held memories. A dusty vanity with a cracked mirror. A wedding dress still hanging from a rusted hook. A small jewelry box, filled with delicate pearls. Elena's hands trembled as she reached for something resting on the vanity. A leather-bound journal. She wiped away the dust. The name on the front was faint, barely visible. But when she finally made it out, her blood turned ice. Amelia Lancaster. Her heart pounded. This was it. The missing woman. The one who looked just like her. Elena opened the journal, her breath shaky as she began reading. The words of the dead. I don't know if I'll make it out of this house alive. They think I don't notice the locked doors, the cameras watching my every move. But I do. Alexander says he loves me. That he would do anything to protect me. But why do I feel like I'm in a cage? Every time I try to leave, something stops me. Someone stops me. They whisper at night, just beyond my door. I hear them moving the locks. I feel them watching. Waiting. I am not alone here. And if I disappear, know this, I did not leave willingly. The last page was smeared with ink, as if she had been writing in a hurry. They're coming for me. If someone finds this, please, don't trust him. Elena's breath hitched. Don't trust who? Before she could turn another page, a deep voice cut through the silence. Elena. She gasped, spinning around. Alexander stood in the doorway. His expression was unreadable, but his dark eyes locked onto the journal in her hands. You shouldn't be down here, he said softly. Elena's heart pounded. What happened to her, Alexander? She demanded, gripping the book like a lifeline. Where is Amelia? He took a step closer. It's complicated. Then explain. Another step. His voice dropped. Some things should stay buried. She had to get out of there. Elena bolted for the door, but Alexander was faster. He grabbed her wrist, holding her firmly. Elena, he murmured. If you keep looking for ghosts, you'll only find yourself haunted. Her pulse thundered. His grip wasn't painful, but it wasn't gentle either. She swallowed hard. Let me go. A pause. Then, slowly, he released her. I don't want to lose you too, he whispered. Too? Elena's head spun. Was that guilt in his voice? Or, a threat? She clutched the journal to her chest and hurried past him, her mind racing. What really happened to Amelia Lancaster? And more importantly, was Elena next?